Omega Management Group Corp. and Epic Connections. I want to thank you for joining us today for a webcast on the topic of turning contact centers into gold. Today's event is part of Omega's Building Customers for Life webcast series, which focuses on how companies can drive revenue and profits by implementing a customer experience management CEM strategy. Each webcast will cover a different aspect of this strategy, and we hope you can join us for the whole series. My name is Bill Bradley, Director of Marketing for Omega. We help organizations drive revenue and profits by designing and implementing effective CEM strategies to improve the satisfaction and loyalty of customers, employees, partners, and other key stakeholders. Omega is proud to have Epic Connections co-sponsoring today's webcast. Epic significantly reduces the time required to identify, evaluate, and ramp up a relationship with a new outsourced contact center. I'm pleased to introduce our distinguished group of presenters today who will talk about how their companies are using contact centers to boost customer satisfaction and loyalty, which I think we would all agree is pure gold to any business. Vivian Hairston-Blade, President and CEO, Eagle Consulting, LLC. Amy McCarty, Vice President, Client Solutions and Customer Experience, APAC Customer Services, Inc. Mary Murcott, CEO and President, Novo One Contact Centers, and Lynn Hinderacker, Director of Marketing with Epic Connections. Finally, this webcast is being recorded, and a link with the full audio and slides will be sent to everyone who registered. Finally, Omega will provide a link to download our CEM Playbook Strategy Toolkit, which contains a host of resources to help your organization build customers for life. And I think that will introduce our very first speaker, Vivian Hairston-Blade, who will frame contact center operations in context of our discussion today within the operations of Omega's CEM DNA Playbook Strategy. So, Vivian, please take it away. It's all yours.
Great. Thank you so much, Bill, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to introduce the topic for today's webinar. 2/3 of consumers are willing to spend up to 20% more with a company they perceive to have good customer service. And that statistic is according to American Express's 2012 Global Customer Service Barometer. Now, wouldn't that be a nice premium for each of us? But this tells us just how important customer service is to your business growth and your profitability. Your contact center has one of the greatest opportunities to impact those sales premiums and long-term customer relationships. They're often one of the few operations with ongoing direct contact with customers and even other key stakeholders such as prospects, other partners, and some of your suppliers. Now, whether they're answering a question, taking an order, or resolving an issue, the quality of these interactions are among the most important in your business. Yet equipping our frontline employees adequately is often considered a secondary business priority. Competent and highly knowledgeable agents who can quickly and reliably take care of customer issues or requests are basic, just fundamental expectations today. But we should see these times when customers reach out to us as touchable moments where reps can successfully move customers through the loyalty cycle. Ongoing training and skill development in the areas of interpersonal skills, team effectiveness, accountability, and service excellence will give your agents the skills they need to be successful brand builders. And you want your agents to think of themselves as brand builders. Equally important are to create a culture and environment where employees are truly engaged, and in turn, they become motivated to build brand ambassadors among your customers. You'll reduce employee and customer churn. Your investment in the front line is one of the highest return on investment opportunities you have, but one of the fewest opportunities that we even take advantage of in our companies. With rapid technological advancements we now experience, customer interactions come from a myriad of sources, and I know you experienced this a lot in your own call center today. So the phrase call center is being used less often because the phone is no longer the primary form of interaction with the company. And so we hear contact center being used more, and it's really gaining favor, and that acknowledges that the explosive growth of social media and mobile applications have become preferred alternatives to the phone. So your agents have got to be skilled to engage with customers as necessary via each of these important touch points. So you got to view your contact center as a precious gemstone. That's how I like to think of it. It's a valuable asset that even when it may not be a direct revenue generator, it is a significant influencer on both revenue and profitability. Now, as you can see on the next slide, you'll see a graphic that represents Omega's Customer Experience Management DNA Playbook strategy. This is a roadmap for companies to follow to become customer-driven organizations. Now, there's no specific step assigned for contact centers here because the interactions permeate the entire customer journey, what Omega calls the Big Four. And these four are 1, acquisition, 2, retention, 3, growth, and 4 is win-back. The roadmap you see begins with a strategic assessment of where you are today on your customer journey and alignment with your business strategy, your culture, and values so that you lead from the top in engaging the whole organization in the effort. Customers want and need partners who help them achieve their goals, and your contact centers are an important part of that mission. They should be an integral part of your strategic planning. During the analyze phase, the voice of the customer through a variety of feedback channels such as relationship and transactional surveys and internal performance data provides the sometimes painful yet helpful insight on what customers experience with you compared to how they like to do business with you. And sometimes there are some differences that we see in the two. Contact center metrics are a vital and important part of how we measure ourselves. And what you're going to hear today are some different approaches to our view of contact center through new types of performance metrics. The act phase is where the rubber meets the road, where you're actively taking what you learned in the analyze phase and you're driving those improvements in operations, in services, and products. As customer-facing resources, our contact centers should be a focus for brand building. Don't think of them as just break fix. And lastly, how did we do? During the assess phase, your analysis of return on investment from these improvement efforts will prove the value of customer experience to the business. Your contact center, again, is a critical component in driving that return on investment even higher. So leverage that asset that you have in doing so. What you're going to hear in the presentations going forward are new and innovative ways to equip contact centers as strategic assets in your organization. You'll come away with thought-provoking ideas and tools you can put to use today. Bill?
Vivian, thank you. That was a great summary to show the way contact centers permeate the entire customer journey. They really, really do. And it's a great segue into our presentation. And Amy, I think we are now ready for your presentation. Pleased to introduce Amy McCarty. Amy, take it away. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. I appreciate that. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the APAC Customer Listening Post. So as we see on the next slide, we've really taken a look at how we can best garner the voice of our customers and really take an active approach to listening to the customers. And in order to do this, client experience or customer experience at APAC really is looked at as a three-legged stool. So really we have, out of those three legs that have to be equally balanced and weighted, we have the agent experience. The agents are key and integral to every interaction that we have coming into our center, whether it's via phone, chat, email, etc. They need to feel valued. They need to understand the value that they bring to that interaction, and they need to provide a consistent experience to the customer. Second leg of the stool is really that customer who's calling in, making sure that every experience they have with us is according to their expectations, that it's consistent and that it's delivered at the appropriate time in the appropriate manner. And then the third is really the industry, because as customer experience continues to evolve within the industry is so key to providing input and providing feedback to companies, as well as companies providing feedback to the industry to make sure the customer experience model really continues to evolve. So within this model, the part that the voice of the customer has really taken is the centerpiece, this listen piece. This is really one of the most integral components of the customer experience model, where we are gathering data from multiple sources to really give information to our clients. So we're gathering data from what the agents hear on the phones. We're gathering data through surveys, customer satisfaction surveys, feedback, et cetera, that we hear, and we're aggregating that and providing that back to our customers. So if we look at the next slide, it really talks to how we gather that information, or where we look for that information. So we look at each interaction that we have, and once again, it could be on the phone, it could be in a chat, it could be via email, multiple forms, but we look at each interaction as having multiple touch points and having key moments of truth, and you really see those in the center. And those key moments of truth are really where we look to gather the information on what the client is saying, or the customer, or the caller, or the person on the other side of the chat, what they're saying to us. So it could be that they're saying, we don't understand, I went yesterday to make a purchase and it, taxes and fees were included in the price. Today they're not. I don't like that. Little things like that when you're looking at an interaction are things to gather and feedback to the client so they can continue to monitor how their customers are interacting with them. So as we move on to the next slide, as we looked at this continuum, this interaction continuum, we said, okay, we really need to do some gathering. We need to do some piloting of a tool that we could utilize with our agents and with the contacts coming into our centers. So one of our clients, and a key part of this is that the client has to be as engaged and as favorable to customer experience as we are. And we do have one client like that. They're a high volume. We have multiple clients, but the one that we chose to really partner with on this, they're a high volume online retailer. They are very involved in anything that we launch. We launch multiple pilots for them throughout the year. Some continue into full-scale production. Some we launch, we analyze, and they don't make sense, and so we shut them down. So they're very involved. So that client worked with us, and really we were able to put this pilot out there and start gathering information. The client is also very involved in employee engagement and believes that they need to give feedback to our employees just like the employees give feedback to them on what their customers are saying. So what we put into place was really a daily listening post, and we used it initially as a proof of concept. And on the next slide, you'll see a little bit of a snapshot of what it looked like. So basically, this was a little, call it a notepad, call it something, it was a little data entry session on the side of the agent's desktop that as they were taking calls, if they had maybe a very frustrated customer because they couldn't find where something was now placed on the website. So, for example, this client is an online retailer. Maybe they moved the placement of the click to chat button. Maybe they moved where a certain type of item was found. Maybe they changed how you could categorize or how you could sort or search. If the agent heard this on the call, they could easily fill this in and add the data and then click, and it would go into a database for us. On a daily, weekly, monthly basis, we were able to pull the data, start to see trends, and provide that information to our client. Our client was then able to take that data and really do some prioritization. So if you look at the next slide, these are a few of the things we were able to really focus on. So our client was really able to get a better pulse of their customers through this. So they were able to be more responsive. this allowed them to, in a very different way from just listening to calls, they were now, or reading chat sessions, they were able to see what the customers were having to say in a condensed manner and begin to respond. They were able to really prioritize enhancements that they would do to their web tool. So if they had a list of 100 things, 100 different projects they wanted to implement for the web tool, and they saw that 5 of them were really hot buttons for what was happening, the trends over the past week or the past month or the past quarter, they were able to prioritize those towards the top and really be more responsive to their customer base. They also were able to use this internally for their decision-making processes in terms of, like I said, prioritizing enhancements, and then also to talk to the different groups. If they had to bring multiple business units together to make decisions, they were able to provide this data so everybody could make decisions on the same customer feedback channels. And then the other things they did with it is on a quarterly basis, they do town halls with our agents, and they're able to let our employees know how their feedback or the information they provided from the callers or from the chat sessions or from the emails, how that impacted their prioritization and what changes were made to the website, to the processes and how they respond to customers, et cetera. So it really was able to touch multiple components and provide more data to them. And so as they looked forward, they were much more responsive to their customer base. Bill, I'll turn it back over to you.
Very, very revealing about the listening post concept, engaging employees and getting them closer to being cognizant of the customer experience. That's tremendous. I think now we're delighted to introduce Mary Murcott, who's going to give us the perspective from Novo One Contact Centers on the customer experience, the final frontier. Mary?
Okay. If we go to the next slide, I'm going to talk about in the next few minutes 4 tips that we have, our top tips on creating great customer experience. And we think great customer experience and great service starts with the culture of service. So that culture of service starts with the look and feel of your center. And what you're seeing is our living room. And as you walk into our center, this is where we do coaching, counseling. This is where we do interviews. And from time to time, a cocktail party for our new advisors that come on the phone. And what you'll see in the very back, those black and white photos, those are big blow-up photos of our top 5 to 10% of our employees, our pace setters, those ones that we want to have be the role models. We want people to know who the role models are. If you get up there, you can come off, but nobody wants to come off, so that's a good thing. And then on the far right, you'll see our customer doll, and she has those seated at the executive table. When we go around and we make a decision, we ask what workforce planning is going to think and what operations is thinking about this, what finance is thinking about a decision we're going to take. We also say, what would the customer think? And we think, and this is Laura Adams, she's our customer doll, and some people think she's creepy, but she actually reminds us of who we're in business for, and that's the customer, and the customer's never creepy. So anyway, people remark all the time, this doesn't feel like a call center to us, and we take that as a compliment. We call it the anti-call center. Most call centers tend to be overly rigid and focused on a lot of metrics that don't matter. So we take it as a compliment. So if we go to the next slide, Harvard Business Review says that only 5% of companies both have a good strategic plan and a mission that they've connected the dots all the way down to the action of the line employees, in this case, our advisors. And so our mission is to power way cool people to create brilliant customer experiences, and they know that. And each and every day they look for wow calls. We actually measure the % wow calls that they get where customers actually say, wow, this is so much better than the last place I called. So they know every day what they're in business for. If you go to the next slide, and I really want to, we want to treat our employees right. So we think we have an employee-first culture. We think treating customers right starts with treating your employees right. And so we do it because, we want to work in a cool place, but we also know that profitability for us and our clients is critical, and it's critical because those companies that are firms of endearment on the far left of this slide, those companies that are on the best places to work, they have 1,000% improvement in profitability over 10 years versus Jim Collins' good, great companies or the Standard & Poor's companies. So it's not only the right thing to do, and it doesn't just make me feel good, it's a good business thing to do. So, we also can't create we spend a lot of time on culture for two reasons. We can't create a policy and procedure for every situation. So advisors must know intuitively what we would want them to do in uncharted waters. So, I think that when we talk about culture, we talk about a culture of service where they don't get in trouble for doing the right thing, that we've set out performance guidelines and guiding principles that allow them to be pretty autonomous. If we go to the next slide, we actually changed a lot of our technology, and we created a customer obsession program, about 60 best practices of the best-in-class call centers, and it was based on understanding some new anchor facts. So we went out in search of things we didn't think we knew. And here's what came back, that 40% of all handle time spent searching for information. When I ask, my clients, when they're starting to come in as new clients, I ask them if they think that's true, and they say at least. So 69% of advisors, those are phone advisors, don't have the answers they're looking for. That comes from an Accenture survey of consumers. And 87% of consumers feel like they were bounced to multiple advisors during a single transaction. So that led us to believe that there needs to be new practices, new measurement systems, and new technologies. Some of the new technologies drove the new measurements that I want to talk about. But one of the conclusions we came to is knowledge management. The knowledge database needed to be a priority based on these anchor facts, that we were just not giving our people on the phones the right information and ammunition to be able to deal with the customer's problems and the one right answer. So we developed 8 unique technologies that drive knowledge management and for the advisors to be true experts, which in turn, by the way, really reduces attrition on the phones. When they feel like they're experts and their job matters and they're really good at their job, the attrition rate has come way down. If we go to the next slide, we looked at the other anchor fact we took a look at is we looked at Forrester's Customer Service Index. And if you've never looked at Customer Experience Index, if you've never seen it, it's really interesting. It takes a look at about 100 companies. And the ones at the bottom of the list tend to be telecom, wireless, ISPs, and healthcare. And, airlines are in there as well. But we asked ourselves, what do these industries have in common? We think they have in common the 3 C's, and I'm going to add a 4th too. Complexity, compliance, change, and a little bit of commoditization are driving, that complexity in particular, driving quality, driving total cost of operation, and driving, in many cases, poor customer experience. So we spent a lot of time on getting the right technologies in particular knowledge management, and some new metrics. If we go to the next slide, Bill, we can take a look, and I want to contrast this slide. This is customer service versus customer experience. On the far right are the traditional contact center roles. On the left are additional points of contact, and I would say add one more. I think I forgot it, marketing. And, we have been working with a client that just changed one thing, and it wasn't even the contact center. And we got them to change, and this is a healthcare client, their how they spoke about things, their language, their lexicon, and made it simpler, made it in customer language. And in 1 year, their customer experience scores in Forrester changed by 5 points. And when I asked them what changed, and they said, well, your suggestion of helping us change that language. So, it's not always things in the customer contact center that need to be changed. It may be elsewhere. And as an outsourcer, we help our clients beyond the contact center. If you go to the next slide, these are the traditional ABCs of contact center management, all trunks busy, ATB, customer sat, QA, true calls per hour, abandonment rate, after-call work. But, those are traditional, and they're good process ones. We measure them like in any other outsourcer or good contact center, but they're not key or critical to customer experience. If we go to the next slide, because those are productivity measures in most cases, we have 32 customer experience metrics most people don't measure, or if they measure them, they don't measure them in the right way. And I want to share with you 3 of them. And I just pulled these 3 at random because they're the easiest to talk about. Dead air time. I don't know about you, but when you're on a phone and you hear a lot of dead air time, either I think as a call center professional, no call control. Most of the time I think they can't find the answer, or they don't know the answer, they're not sure. And most of the time I'm right, they just don't have the answer, it's not at their fingertips. And so we measure that by call type and by advisor. And what we will find different issues if we measure it by call type. We might find it's around certain calls. By advisor, we may think it's a training issue and be able to focus in on that and fix it. The way we measure percent dead air time is we measure it through our voice analytics. So we can hear the percent of dead air time. So if everybody's running about 30% okay, that might be an issue, but it's a different issue than if I have somebody at 2% and somebody at 60% dead air time. So that's one thing we measure, and you can just translate that into the customer experience in terms of their believing that we have the answer. If after, a couple minutes on hold you finally get an answer, frequently what I hear is customers calling back in shopping for another answer because they're not really sure they had the right answer because they didn't get it very quickly and with confidence. Number 2 is transfer percentage by advisor. So if we see transfer rates above 10%, we think we probably have a system, process, or skills-based routing problem. We might have people not skilled or not trained in the area in the skill they're supposed to be in. But if, again, at a rep level or advisor level, we see some people at 10% transfer and the rest of the people at 3% transfer, then we know we have a different issue perhaps. So, above 10%, if everybody's above 10%, I think you have a significant process or system issue, and I would seriously, gather a group and focus in on fixing that to get it under 10%. If you have individuals that are above that, that's a separate issue, and I would address it individually. And lastly, customer effort score. So, customer effort score is interesting. Recently, a number of companies have begun adopting that, and it's actually starting to replace Net Promoter Score. In fact, Net Promoter Score has been touted as the be-all and end-all. The fact of the matter is the only thing that Net Promoter Score can tell you is that top box. It has truly focused and correlation with loyalty. The actual Net Promoter Score itself, not that much. What's interesting is a better correlation between customer effort score and ultimate loyalty of the customer, a much higher correlation factor. So customer effort score on a scale of 1 to 10 typically, or 1 to 9, is how much effort was it for you to do business with our company or our call center or our legal department. And the more tightly you get and the more tighter you get down the line to actually know what the problem was. And what we do is we simply ask the customer in a narrative if they were below 80%, what was wrong, how can we improve it, and they tell us. So I think that getting to that, then you can start developing broader and tighter customer effort score measurement systems. But I think that customer effort score is clearly where the industry is going. And lastly, I'm going to go to the next slide. I'm going to say if you really want to improve your customer experience, rethink your offshore if you're going offshore. And I'm going to say ahead of time, there are exceptions to what I'm going to say. I've had some really good service offshore, but in general, it's not working very well. In fact, the average customer experience score is at least 20 points lower offshore than onshore, particularly if you're in India. Now, I'm not going to pick on just offshore. I'm going to pick on onshore. I recently did a survey we have a great predictive assessment of new applicants coming in, and we did an English proficiency in some American cities. There were so many American cities where the English proficiency of the applicants was only 30%. I was horrified. So I'm not just picking on offshore. I would say be careful about onshore as well, where you put your centers. And I think that's it. We have one more slide. And just the last thing I want to leave you about is customer experience call centers is really about building the brand. We believe that every customer interaction either helps or hurts the brand. There really isn't any in between. So it's sort of like deposits in the trust bank in your marriage. You have enough of them. You can have an extraction every once in a while, but we really think it hurts or helps, and that's the business we're in. Bill?
Mary, thank you. Really great information from the anchor facts that you relayed, the productivity versus customer experience concept. I think the customer effort score, for many of us, I think that's a fresh new look at evaluating the customer engagement and customer experience dynamic. So thank you again for that presentation. That brings us to our next presenter. I want to introduce Lynn Hinderaker, Director of Marketing with Epic Connections. Clear path forward, Lynn. Tell us all about enabling true engagement through convergence and divergence. You got the con.
Thank you, Bill, and I appreciate a moment here to kind of take all the comments, very constructive with Vivian and Amy and Mary have made some incredible points, and hopefully pull them together and move the contact center industry towards a commitment to innovation. Clearly, this is the time to rethink infrastructure, operations, and to move from an incremental approach to a game-changing or an exponential approach. But many contact centers don't know how to go about doing that, and of course, we're going to introduce this notion of convergence and divergence. So, Bill, if you'll take me to my first slide, we'll get started. Vivian mentioned a problem earlier as we take a look at the first slide here. The two-thirds of the customer base out there will, in fact, move if they sense that they'll be able to get better customer service elsewhere. Here are some of the other key issues in the industry. We talk a lot about customer engagement. This is the rhetoric that we supposedly adhere to insofar as raising our standards. But also, we focus on cost and lowering costs. And, of course, the question is, can we really lower cost and go from customer satisfaction to customer engagement? Can we do that at the same time? What is true engagement? I would suggest to you that that takes us back to what a brand, a truly vital brand, consists of, and it is primarily emotional. But when we get down to the customer service process, oftentimes emotion is left out of the equation as we opt for efficiency. And then asking a very broad question, what is really the purpose of technology, especially as it relates to engagement? Let's take a look at this next slide here, and we'll go deeper into the problems that the industry struggles with. 55% of Americans walked away, or customers walked away from a purchase because of poor customer service. So despite the high achievers that we're listening to today, the contact center industry as a whole is still struggling to not only reach satisfaction, but to go all the way to customer engagement. It just reminds us of the size and the scope of the problem that we face. And it's a pretty interesting problem because this is kind of a pivotal time in the industry. Next slide will solution. Solutions are either too me too, let me say that correctly, or too wannabe. We're too focused on the tangible exchange, the transaction, shall we say, and we're ignoring the brand experience. All I'm trying to do right now is recap some of the points that have been touched on lightly. We've listened to some innovative procedures. Obviously, Mary made a great point about, in the end, it all comes back to what is the brand about and how do we reinforce the essence and the spirit of the brand and take it from just a transaction to an entire experience. It happens every day in best of breed, but it's not necessarily the average interaction. We'll go on to the next slide here and I think elaborate on this slightly. Quality and cost and speed are simply a means to an end. We sit around at management meetings and talk about these things all the time, and sometimes we forget what the end point is, and it is to create an emotional bond, which obviously is much stronger and much more important long-term than the dollar exchange. The gentleman that runs Zappos, a well-known organization online, they have a very different and unique and striking customer service ethic. They're extremely profitable, and they basically have a very, very happy feeling on the phone. It's an exciting, fun place to be at Zappos, and they're all about creating friends on the phone, not necessarily optimizing one individual phone call or interaction. So kind of provides an example of this principle. On our next slide here, we begin to move into a solution to this problem, and that is to capture the intangibles that people truly prize when they first purchase a product or a brand, and that's where we'll rediscover the compelling elements of value. It's kind of like a marriage that has gotten a little bit tired over the years, maybe 20, 30, 40 years down the road, and sometimes couples need to rethink what was it that brought us together originally, right? Where was the fire, the spirit, the playfulness, the excitement? All those kinds of emotional qualities are inherent in every purchase, no matter what it is. But somehow, when we get to the customer service end of the continuum, we lose all that. We forget what the brand truly represents on an emotional level. So let's take a look at the next slide, and we'll kind of move forward here. So I've chosen 3 little Shar-Pei dogs to kind of remind us of what the 3 primary aspects of what a brand really is. And I would love to sit around at a contact center management meeting with the operators, the supervisors, and so on, and talk about what the brand's mystery is, what the sensuality, what the intimacy of the brand really is, whether it's stories and myths. And believe me, all these things can be condensed and shared appropriately in a phone conversation or even in a chat and text conversation. The sensory cues that a brand has, the sense of commitment, the degree of empathy, the type of passion that is supposed to come from this particular brand as opposed to another brand. So deepening the emotional connection with the brand should be on every contact center's development or marketing plan, training plan, and so on. Let's take a look at the next slide here, and it will kind of help us move towards achieving this and making that engagement. So all types of innovation, regardless of what industry we're talking about, are kind of threefold. First, we have to get everybody on the same page and agree on what reality is. I think might have been Amy a little bit earlier mentioned that we all have to kind of come to grips with what is really happening in interaction with the customer. So that's convergence. Divergence is the period. We've all heard about this before, where we're welcoming new ideas and input and outside-in perspectives, and of course then convergence, coming together again and moving forward. This could be a 6 to 9, perhaps a 12-month process, and now is the time. I have to emphasize this. Now is the time, primarily because of the emergence of social media and the influence of portable computing tools, mobility, changing the game truly. Now is the time for these kinds of innovation initiatives. Let's take a look at the next slide. So reality check, as we discussed before, this is a perfect time. It should be done more than once a year possibly. Benchmarks, establishing what excellence really is. Customer surveys, of course. Omega is very deeply involved in that, but there can also be qualitative surveys where we sit down with individuals and ask a question, why? Why do you say that? What happened? Why did you do this? It's very revealing. Performance audits, executive interviews, asking ourselves when we lose a client, when we fail to retain an end user or customer, why? What's really happening? And then, of course, everybody gets on the same page. They converge around these facts. Let's take it out, look at another aspect of convergence. This is just the first stage of kind of an innovation initiative on the next slide. On the next slide, we're trying to take a look at the future, get everybody comfortable with what the future should be. In 2, 3, 4 years, what will the industry look like? How will the customer change? How will all these multiple channels converge? If they do, what will we be struggling with at that time? Will we be going down the curve or up the curve? And most importantly, what does perfection look like in 3, 4, 5 years? Very important question. We get our hands on that and make sure that everybody agrees on these ideas. Then we move into phase 2. And this is the important phase most people associate with. And it's very interesting that the contact center leaders get uncomfortable with phase 2, Bill, on the next stage here, the next slide. Here we see the Shar-Pei representing divergence. What we're talking about here is bringing in new genetic material, outsiders, with different decision architectures, social architectures, fresh ideas, new values, a different type or level of energy. That's what we're looking for in this so-called divergence stage. Let's go on to our next slide. You'll see some examples quickly of all the various types of input. And the issue here is that a lot of general managers and owners of facilities worry that this will go on and that there'll be no end to all the diverse opinions and trends and scenarios and business models that are being looked at, ideation, new options, and so on. Of course, that can't continue, but you need to have all these influences, and they particularly are very good if they come from outside the facility, and we're importing new ideas and new business models from other industries. Very helpful during this phase, this second phase of innovation. So let's take a look at this third phase. It's kind of this next slide here. And we come together again. Oh, I always forget this. I apologize. This is what it looks like. You know, when you talk to somebody that has a left brain orientation, they're analytical, they're process-oriented, they love lists, they're sequential in their thinking, it's difficult for them to understand what this divergence stage is, what creativity at an organizational level really does look like. And I thought this very interesting, colorful image with all these overlapping and mutating colors kind of symbolized the type of dialogue and the feelings as we discuss the emergence of social media, of course, mobile channels and customers talking to us via text and video. And again, how is the customer supposed to feel? This is a whole new level of inquiry or introspection. Usually it's about function and what are we supposed to do then, and step number 4 and step number 5. But this is about how do we evoke feelings in the end users. Now we'll go on to our next slide. So we converge now finally. We've had our input process. We have to come together ultimately, galvanize employees around new sets of expectations. We utilize dashboards, system integration, technology to get a unified view of the customer. We're pulling old ideas and melding them together, fusing them together with new ideas, and we're making a commitment to a new path forward, a new clear path forward. So you see us coming together, going apart, experimenting, sharing new ideas, then coming back together and moving forward with a sense of commitment and action. This is organizational innovation. Primarily, this is how it goes. We're applying human creativity in this 3-step process. So we got one more slide here, I believe, as we kind of begin to wrap up here. Yeah, and this is kind of an interesting thing as we take a look at the human brain. You know, organizationally, we are a brain. Collectively, we are a thinking mechanism together. And, of course, the left side of the brain, as I mentioned before, is all about sequence and predictability and efficiency. And, of course, that's what we do when we converge, step number 1. Then we go to the right hemisphere of the contact center's brain. I'll put quotes around that, our collective thinking mechanism. And that's when we welcome new ideas. This is the scary part for a lot of general managers that are focusing on control. But this is the time when we actually connect the dots. We begin to see new patterns of productivity, new patterns of opportunity. And we look at customers certainly in a different way when we're in this phase. And then we move back over to the left side of the brain, line up our action steps, our goals. We move forward from 1 to 2 to 3, and so on. And so this is kind of an interesting symbol of the contact center's intelligence, collective intelligence. And this is what enables us to stay fresh and make that very important and occasional exponential change moving into the future, so important to do right now. I think that's the last slide. Bill, thank you for giving me an opportunity to summarize some of the things that Vivian and Amy and Mary have already said.
Okay. Lynn, thank you very much. That was an inspiring look into innovation, convergence, divergence, emotional connection, something that maybe gets overlooked, a glimpse at the future, not overlooking that, and the importance of developing and maintaining brand intimacy, all points that I think everyone has touched on, but you did a particularly good job of putting that into context. And let's go ahead and take the first one. I think, Amy, I'll ask you to answer this one. The question is, what are some fundamental guidelines in determining whether an in-house or external contact center operation, or both, is the proper choice?
So in terms of fundamental guidelines, Bill, it really comes down to a discussion on what is the go-forward strategy, what experience are you looking for your customers, and what are the drivers? So is the driver cost? Is the driver, the time and the attention and the resources internally, or is there a greater need? And in many situations, if you're looking at truly partnering with an outsourcer and moving it forward, you can do so successfully and outsource that and still retain a lot of control over what happens, because really your partner, your vendor, your outsourcer is there to deliver according to your customer experience strategy or your customer segment strategy. And so they'll work with you hand in hand to really deploy that and make sure that it's delivering. So it really comes down to have a good, solid consultative conversation with a couple of different folks that you're looking to potentially utilize, and a good, reputable outsourcer will really help you make that decision. And in cases where we see the need, we really are able to tell the client, yes, you should outsource, or no, you shouldn't. It's not the right time for you. Here's a few things you should do internally to really attack this first before you're culturally ready to make that move.
Okay, thank you. The next question for Mary, since you touched on this during your presentation about outsourcing or offshoring. So the question, are companies continuing to outsource contact center operations overseas to places like India, or is the trend moving back towards insourcing with U.S.-based contact centers?
Bill, the answer is both. They are, and I spoke at a very large real estate company, and I saw a lot of potential clients still going offshore, and for some reasons that maybe I don't agree with, but I see a number of them, as many, coming back onshore for a lot of different reasons. The reasons they went over there 10, 15 years ago were probably really good ones. We had a lot of very simple call types, password reset, things like that could be done, very process-oriented. I say this, then you do this, that kind of thing. And the rates of pay over offshore were very, very low. What's happened in the last 10 or 15 years, however, is the rates of pay offshore, particularly India and Philippines now, are going up 10, 15, 20% a year. Added to that, we've automated a lot of those simple calls. They've gone to the web, they've gone to the IVRs, and what's left are contextually sensitive, complex calls that need, I think, someone that understands the culture to be able to help them through it. And I can tell that because I've dealt with a lot of offshore as a consultant. I listen for short calls. And when I see a lot of short calls compared to the onshore doing the same job, I know that customers are voting by hanging up the phone. So, the answer is yes, a lot of people are still going over. A lot of people are coming back. What we have seen is we have a worksheet that we help clients with, showing them the total cost of ownership of first contact resolution difference, of loyalty difference, of upsell difference. And when we add all that up, we frequently can show customers up to 15% savings by coming home. I've done that with a lot of my clients, and we've brought them home. They don't always save money, but it usually isn't a lot more to come back now. Thank you.
Vivian, here's one that also talks to some of the remarks that you made earlier in the webcast, so I'm going to ask you to expand a little bit more on the different kinds of forms of contact. So the question is inbound, outbound telephone activity still the overwhelming method of interaction for contact centers, or have electronic media such as email, social media, text, online chat replaced much of what used to be done primarily or exclusively by phone?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is still a preponderance for consumers to use more of the traditional types by and large. You have, even though people are gradually moving to more of these technological sources of communication, some are still testing that out a little bit, testing the waters, and feel like, can I get a good response? Now, people who are more familiar with using some of those technologies certainly are, and using more and more of them. But we are seeing a growth in that area. So we need contact centers who have the flexibility of being able to communicate with customers the way they want to be communicated with. And I think that's the way that we need to think about it. Think less on trends, but look at your customer base and truly have some flexible options for them and understand how they want to work with you and communicate with you.
Thank you. Okay, we're close to our allotted time here, but we do have time for one more question. And Lynn, I think I'll ask you to take this one. The question is, how are contact centers incorporating social media interactions with customers and prospects? That's an important element.
Very important element, and it's as yet really unresolved. In many situations, the client has a dedicated group in-house watching the social media and trying to respond. Interestingly, those are usually marketing people, and the marketing folks are not necessarily the best voice insofar as actually interacting with the end user. They don't always relate to the end user perhaps as well as somebody else might. The contact centers are becoming increasingly involved in social media. Obviously, you've got to figure out whether or not somebody has the skills, and that's really the main consideration here is can a voice-oriented operator, frontline agent, be moved into a situation where he or she is watching social media and responding online with text and keyboarding and so on. Issues like punctuation and grammar and so on are very important as well. So it's a different skill set, and so training and movement are key themes right now at the contact center level.
Okay. Well, Lynn, thank you for that answer. And everybody, this pretty much does conclude our webcast today. Once again, on behalf of Omega Management Group Corp. and Epic Connections, and all of our terrific speakers, thanks for your attendance and participation. You may contact our speakers by phone or email with any questions you have. You see their contact information displayed on the screen. Any of those questions we were not able to get to during the Q&A, we'll respond to offline. I want to remind you that you will receive a recorded version of this webcast in the next few days, along with the link to download Omega's CEMDNA Playbook Strategy Toolkit. If you have any questions on Omega's CEMDNA Playbook Strategy or this webcast, here my information is on the screen here, so please call or email me with any questions that you might have. Again, thank you, everybody, and have a good rest of your day. Goodbye.